I was a perfectionist. Everything had to be just right. That's why I waited. I waited and waited until one day I saw a stranger in the mirror. That day, I realized that waiting for the perfect moment was the biggest lie. And right now, you might be falling into the same trap. My name is Jennifer Martinez, and for most of my 32 years, I believed in preparation, meticulous, exhaustive, obsessive preparation. I had spreadsheets for my spreadsheets, color-coded calendars that projected 3 years into the future, backup plans for my backup plans. I thought this made me responsible, strategic, smart. I was wrong. It made me paralyzed. The morning everything changed started like any other Wednesday in Austin. September heat already pressing against my apartment windows at 7 a.m. The sound of traffic building on Riverside Drive below. I stood in my bathroom, toothbrush in hand, staring at my reflection in the mirror, really staring, not just the usual quick glance before rushing out the door. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. She had my face. Sure, my dark hair pulled into the same practical ponytail I'd worn since college, my brown eyes, my mother's nose, my father's stubborn chin, but there was something missing, something fundamental. It took me a full 30 seconds to identify what it was. Life. There was no life in those eyes. I was 32 years old, and I looked like someone going through the motions. Like an actress playing the role of Jennifer Martinez without actually inhabiting the character. And the most terrifying part, I couldn't remember when this had happened, when I had stopped being a person and started being a placeholder. The toothbrush clattered into the sink. My hands were shaking. This wasn't supposed to happen. I had a plan. The plan was perfect. Graduate college with honors. Check. Get a stable job with benefits. Check. Save a specific amount of money. Working on it. Meet the right person. Pending. Start my dream business. Waiting for the right time. Travel the world. Someday. Write that book when I'm ready. Learn guitar. Once things settle down. Waiting. Always waiting. For what? The perfect moment. The moment when I'd have enough money, enough time, enough knowledge, enough confidence, enough everything. The moment when all the stars would align and risk would evaporate and success would be guaranteed. I picked up my phone. 7:14 a.m. I should be leaving for work in 16 minutes. I worked as a project coordinator for a mid-sized tech company, a job I'd taken temporarily 7 years ago while I prepared to launch my own consulting business. 7 years of preparing, 7 years of waiting for the perfect moment to quit and start something meaningful. How many more years would I wait? The question hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled backward, sitting down hard on the edge of my bathtub. My chest felt tight. My breath came short and fast. Panic attack. Some distant part of my brain noted clinically, "You're having a panic attack." But this wasn't fear. Not really. This was recognition. This was the moment when you realize you've been lying to yourself so thoroughly, so consistently, that you've built an entire life on a foundation of excuses. My phone buzzed. A text from my younger brother, Marcus. Marcus, coffee before work, daily grind. I have news, Marcus. 28 years old, college dropout. Had started 4 businesses, failed at 3, currently running a small but growing app development company out of a cramped office in East Austin. He lived in a studio apartment half the size of mine, drove a beat-up Honda Civic, and had maybe $800 in his savings account. He was also the happiest person I knew. I stared at his text. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I had 17 budget presentations to review before a 10 a.m. meeting. I should say no. I should stick to the schedule. I should be there, and I surprised myself by pressing send. The daily grind occupied a corner spot in a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial chic. It was Marcus's favorite place, mostly because the owner, an ancient man everyone called Old Tom, let him camp out for hours, nursing a single Americano while he worked on his lap. I arrived at 7:35, which meant I was 5 minutes early, according to my mental calculation of traffic patterns. Marcus was already there, sitting at his usual table by the window, 2 coffee cups in front of him. He'd ordered for me. He always did. Somehow, he always remembered I took my coffee black with 1 sugar, even though I'd probably mentioned it once, years ago. "You look terrible," he said cheerfully, as I sat down. "Good morning to you too." "No, I mean it. You look like you've seen a ghost." He leaned forward, his easy smile fading into something more serious. "You okay, Jen?" I picked up the coffee. It was still hot, which meant he'd timed my arrival perfectly despite my impromptu acceptance. Meanwhile, I had 3 separate apps on my phone just to manage my schedule, and I still felt perpetually behind. "I saw myself in the mirror this morning," I said. Marcus waited. He was good at that, waiting without filling the silence with nervous chatter. It was one of the things that made him a good entrepreneur. He could sit with discomfort. "Really saw myself," I continued, and I didn't recognize who was looking back. "Yeah," he nodded slowly. "I remember that feeling when, junior year, I was sitting in engineering 402, taking notes on thermodynamics, and I suddenly thought, I'm going to be sitting in rooms like this for the rest of my life. Corporate job, corner office, retirement plan, all of it mapped out. And I felt like I was suffocating. I remembered when he dropped out. Our parents had been devastated. I'd been disappointed, maybe even a little superior. I had lectured him about being irresponsible, about throwing away opportunities, about not having a plan. "You called me an idiot," Marcus said, reading my mind. "I called you impulsive. Same thing, in your dictionary." He grinned, taking any sting out of it. "But you know what? You weren't wrong. I was impulsive. I didn't have a plan. My first business failed in 6 months. Lost every penny I'd saved from my summer jobs. I remember. But here's what you didn't see. I was alive again. For the first time in years, I was actually living instead of preparing to live." He took a sip of his coffee. "So what happened this morning? What made you look in the mirror?" I told him. All of it. The stranger's face, the waiting, the perfect moment that never came, the 7 years at a temporary job, the dreams I'd filed under someday, the life I was going to start living once everything was ready. Marcus listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You want my news?" he asked finally. I blinked at the non sequitur. Sure, I'm expanding the company. We just landed a contract with a major client. I'll be hiring 3 more developers. He paused. I'm 28 years old, Jen. 4 years ago, I had nothing. Now I'm running a real business. And you know when I got ready to start? Never. I never got ready. I just started. The words hung in the air between us. I'm not trying to brag, Marcus continued. I'm trying to show you something. You're smarter than me, more organized, more disciplined. You've got advantages I never had. But I'm doing the thing, and you're still planning to do the thing. And the only difference is that I gave up on Perfect. A middle-aged woman at the next table laughed at something on her phone. A barista called out someone's order. Old Tom shuffled past with a broom, his weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. Normal sounds, normal people, normal Wednesday morning. But I felt like the world had tilted on its axis. I don't know how to give up on Perfect, I said quietly. Yeah, you do. Marcus pulled out his phone, opened his notes app, and slid it across to me. Read that. I looked down. A single sentence, written in his characteristically bad punctuation. Done is better than perfect, because perfect never gets done. Where'd you get that? I asked. Made it up. Well, probably read it somewhere and forgot. Who cares? Point is, it's true. He took his phone back. You know what your problem is. I'm sure you're about to tell me. Your problem is you think life is a test you need to study for, but it's not. It's a sport you play, and you can't get better at a sport by reading about it. You have to suck at it first. You have to fail and fall and look stupid. That's not a bug, Jen. That's the feature. I wanted to argue. My brain immediately began compiling counter-arguments, risk assessments, logical rebuttals. But then I thought about my reflection that morning. The stranger with my face, the woman who had been preparing to live for so long that she'd forgotten how to actually do it. I wouldn't even know where to start, I said. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a knowing look on his face. Yeah, you would. You've got that list, don't you? The Sunday list. He knew me too well. Of course I had a list. I had several lists. Projects I'd start when the time was right. Skills I'd learn once I had more time. Trips I'd take after I saved more money. Risks I'd take when I was more established. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. There it was. Future projects. Last modified 3 months ago. Before that, 8 months ago. I kept adding to it, but never subtracting. Read me the first one, Marcus said. Start freelance consulting business. How long has that been on there? 5 years. What are you waiting for? The question should have been easy to answer. I had a whole mental file of reasons. I needed more experience, more savings, more connections, a better website, a stronger portfolio, more testimonials, better timing, less economic uncertainty. But sitting there in the daily grind, watching my brother watch me with patient knowing in his eyes, every single excuse felt hollow. I'm waiting to be sure I won't fail, I said finally. So you're waiting forever? Marcus said it gently, without judgment, because that kind of sure doesn't exist. Across the coffee shop, old Tom had stopped sweeping and was watching us. How long had he been listening? He caught my eye and nodded slowly, like he understood something I didn't yet. Tell you what, Marcus said, pulling my attention back. Let's make a bet. A bet, a challenge, an experiment, whatever you want to call it. He leaned forward, suddenly animated. 30 days. You pick one thing from that list. Just one thing, and you start it. Not prepare to start it, not plan to start it. Actually start it. Do the thing, Marcus. And here's the kicker. You have to do it badly. I stared at him. Badly, badly, imperfectly, messily. You have to embrace the suck. No waiting until you're ready. No polishing until it's perfect. You launch it, ship it, do it, whatever it is, in 30 days, ready or not. My immediate reaction was visceral refusal. Everything in me recoiled from the idea. Start something I wasn't ready for. Put out work that wasn't polished. Let people see me before I was prepared. But then, that stranger in the mirror. Those empty eyes. 7 years at a temporary job. A Sunday list that kept growing, but never shrinking. What do I get if I do it? I asked. Marcus grinned. Your life back. I should have said no. I should have explained all the very reasonable reasons why this was a terrible idea. I should have outlined a more measured, sensible approach. I should have countered with a better plan that involved proper preparation and risk mitigation. Instead, I heard myself say, "Okay." The word hung in the air for a moment, and I watched Marcus's eyebrows shoot up in surprise. He'd expected me to argue. Hell had expected me to argue. "Okay?" he repeated. "Okay." I felt something shift in my chest. A loosening, like a knot I'd been carrying for years, suddenly starting to unravel. 30 days, one project, done badly. Marcus's grin could have lit up the whole coffee shop. Holy shit, did I just witness Jennifer Martinez agree to something imperfect? Don't make me change my mind. Too late. I'm texting Mom right now. You absolutely are not. But he was already typing, laughing. I reached across the table to grab his phone, and for a moment, we were kids again, wrestling over something stupid, both of us laughing too hard to actually accomplish anything. Old Tom appeared at our table, coffee pot in hand. Up close, his face was a roadmap of wrinkles, his hands gnarled with arthritis, but his eyes were sharp and bright. "Refill?" he asked, in his gravelly voice. "Please," I said, pushing my cup toward him. He poured slowly, carefully. Couldn't help overhearing. He said, "You're gonna do something you're not ready for." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Good." He finished pouring and straightened up with effort. "You know what my biggest regret is?" I shook my head. I waited until I was ready to open this place. Took me 15 years of planning, saving, preparing. By the time I finally did it, I was 63 years old. He looked around the coffee shop with something like fondness and something like sadness. "I love this place, but I think about all the years I could have had it. All the people I could have met, all the experiences I missed, because I was waiting to be ready." "But you did it eventually," I offered. "Eventually." He nodded slowly. "But eventually is the graveyard of dreams, sweetheart. Eventually means probably never." He patted my shoulder with one gnarled hand. "You do it now, while you're scared. That's when it means something." He shuffled away before I could respond. Marcus and I sat in silence for a moment. So, he said finally, which project? I looked down at my phone, at the list I'd been building for 5 years. Start freelance consulting business, launch a podcast, write a book, learn guitar, take a photography class, travel to Japan, volunteer at an animal shelter. All good ideas, all someday projects, all gathering dust in the digital equivalent of a drawer. My finger hovered over start freelance consulting business. It was the obvious choice, the practical one, the one that made the most sense for my career trajectory and financial goals. But that was the problem. It was the perfect choice, which meant I'd probably spend the next 5 years preparing for it. My finger moved down the list. I'm going to launch a podcast, I heard myself say. Marcus blinked. A podcast about perfectionism and waiting and all the ways we sabotage ourselves by trying to be ready. The idea was forming as I spoke, coming together in real time. I'll interview people who started before they were ready, who did things badly and learned, who gave up on perfect. Jen, that's actually brilliant. It's also terrifying. I know nothing about podcasting. I don't have equipment. I've never interviewed anyone. I have no audience. I'd be starting from absolute zero. Marcus's grin widened. Perfect. That's literally the opposite of. I stopped, realizing he was joking. You're an ass.
You love me.
He pulled out his phone again.
Okay, podcast in 30 days.
We need to make this official. We need stakes. Stakes. Accountability. Consequences. Something that makes this real. He typed something. If you don't launch in 30 days, you have to come work for me. What? As my operations manager, I've been needing one anyway. You organize the business. I'll pay you slightly more than you make now. And you quit that soul-sucking temp job that's been temporary for 7 years. I stared at him. That's not a punishment. That's actually a good opportunity. Exactly. Either way, you make a change. Either you launch your own thing, or you come help me build mine. But the waiting ends in 30 days, no matter what. The trap was obvious and brilliant. Either outcome meant forward motion. Either outcome meant the paralysis ended. What do you get if I succeed? I asked. The satisfaction of watching my sister finally live her life. He stood up, draining the last of his coffee. And you have to admit, in front of Mom and Dad, that I was right, and you were wrong. Deal. We shook hands across the table, and I felt it again, that loosening in my chest, like chains I didn't know I was wearing, suddenly falling away. I had 30 days to launch a podcast I knew nothing about, 30 days to do something imperfect, 30 days to prove that done was better than perfect. I was absolutely terrified, and for the first time in years, I felt absolutely alive. The walk back to my apartment took exactly 12 minutes. I know because I timed it, checking my phone every 30 seconds like the compulsive planner I was trying not to be anymore. Trying, the operative word. 30 days to launch a podcast. The commitment felt both exhilarating and nauseating, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing you'd just promised to jump. My brain had already begun its familiar catastrophizing routine. You don't know how to make a podcast. You'll sound like an amateur. People will laugh at you. You'll fail publicly. What if nobody listens? What if somebody does listen and thinks you're terrible? I climbed the stairs to my second-floor apartment. The elevator had been broken for 3 weeks, which the landlord kept promising to fix soon, and fumbled with my keys. My hands were still shaking slightly. Inside, my apartment looked exactly as I'd left it 43 minutes ago. Neat, organized, color-coordinated, everything in its place. My desk in the corner held my laptop, positioned at exactly the right angle for optimal ergonomics. My bookshelf was arranged by topic, then alphabetically by author within each category. My kitchen counter was clear, except for a single coffee maker and a bowl of perfectly arranged fresh fruit that I'd replace every Sunday. It looked like a magazine spread. It looked like nobody actually lived here. I stood in the doorway, seeing it with fresh eyes. The same eyes that had seen a stranger in the mirror that morning. This apartment wasn't a home. It was a waiting room. A place where I existed between the life I had and the life I was supposedly preparing to have. When was the last time I'd done something spontaneous here? Something messy? Something that left evidence of actual living? I couldn't remember. My phone buzzed. A calendar notification, budget presentations review, due before 10 a.m. meeting. I looked at the time, 8:47 a.m. I had 73 minutes to review 17 presentations, each one averaging 12 pages. That gave me approximately 4.3 minutes per presentation if I wanted to arrive 5 minutes early to the meeting. The old Jennifer would already be at her laptop, coffee growing cold beside her, eyes scanning columns of numbers with practiced efficiency. The old Jennifer never missed a deadline, never showed up unprepared, never let anyone down. The old Jennifer also had empty eyes and a Sunday list that kept growing. I made a decision that felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying. I opened my laptop and sent an email to my manager, to Robert Chen at technova. Subject: this morning's meeting. Body: Robert, I need to take a personal day today. I know this is last minute and unprofessional. I apologize for any inconvenience. I'll be back tomorrow and will stay late to catch up on anything urgent. Jennifer. I hit send before I could second guess myself. My heart was pounding. In 7 years at Technova, I had never taken an unplanned day off, never called in sick unless I had a doctor's note, never missed a deadline. My attendance record was perfect. My performance reviews were flawless. I was reliable Jennifer, dependable Jennifer, the one everyone could count on. I was also miserable Jennifer, invisible Jennifer, the one nobody really knew. The email whooshed away. Done. No taking it back. Now, I stood there for a moment, waiting for the panic to hit. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Relief. Deep, profound relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for 7 years and finally exhaled. My phone rang. Marcus, did you just take a personal day? He asked, without preamble. How did you? You shared your work calendar with me 2 years ago, when you were coordinating my meeting with your company. You never unshared it. I could hear the grin in his voice. Jennifer Martinez, taking an unplanned personal day. I'm documenting this for posterity. Shut up. This is character growth. This is a hero's journey moment. This is Marcus. I have no idea what I'm doing. The joking tone dropped from his voice. Yeah, that's the point. I walked to my window, looking down at Riverside Drive. Morning traffic was building, people heading to jobs they might love or hate, or feel nothing about. How many of them were living their actual lives? How many were just going through the motions, waiting for Sunday? I'm scared, I admitted. Good. Fear means you're doing something that matters. You know what should scare you more? What? Waking up at 63 years old like old Tom, realizing you spent 40 years waiting to start. I thought about old Tom's face when he talked about his biggest regret, the way his eyes had held both fondness and sadness. Eventually is the graveyard of dreams, sweetheart. Okay, I said. Okay, I'm doing this. I'm actually doing this. I'm launching a podcast in 30 days. Hell yes, you are. And I'm going to help you. You don't know anything about podcasting either. Exactly. We'll figure it out together. Badly. He paused. What are you doing right now? Standing in my apartment, having an existential crisis. Perfect. Stay there. I'm coming over. Marcus, don't you have work? I'm the boss. I can take a morning off. Plus, this is more important. This is my thing, not yours. Jennifer. His voice softened. You spent 7 years being there for everyone else. Your company, your friends, mom and dad, even me. You've been so busy being reliable that you forgot to be real. Let me be here for you. For once, let someone help you do something imperfect. My throat tightened. Okay, 20 minutes. Make coffee. The real stuff, not that decaf nonsense you drink after noon. He hung up before I could respond. I made coffee. Real coffee. The expensive beans I saved for special occasions, as if living my actual life didn't qualify as special enough. While it brewed, I cleared space on my dining table, something I rarely used since I usually ate standing at the kitchen counter, scrolling through my phone. The apartment smelled like coffee and possibility. I pulled out a notebook. Not my usual structured planner, with its color-coded sections and pre-printed daily schedules, just a simple spiral notebook I'd bought 2 years ago with the vague intention of journaling someday. The first page was blank. All the pages were blank. Someday had never come. Until now. I wrote at the top of the first page, podcast project, 30 days to imperfect launch. Then I stopped. The pen hovered over the paper. What came next? I didn't know how to make a podcast. I didn't know what equipment I needed, what software to use, how to edit audio, how to find guests, how to promote it, The familiar anxiety spiral started spinning up. My chest tightened. My breathing got shallow. This is why I planned. This is why I prepared. This is why I waited until I knew what I was doing before I forced myself to breathe, to feel the pen in my hand, to look at the blank page, not as a void of ignorance, but as a space of possibility. I didn't need to know everything. I just needed to know the next step. What was the next step? I wrote, Step 1. Figure out what the hell I'm doing. That made me laugh. Actual laughter, surprising myself. When was the last time I'd laughed alone in my apartment? Under that, I wrote, Step 2. Do it anyway. A knock at my door. Marcus. Already? I checked my phone 19 minutes since his call. He must have driven like a maniac. I opened the door. He stood there with his laptop bag and a white paper sack that smelled like heaven. Breakfast tacos. From 1 in a million, he announced, pushing past me into the apartment. You can't start a revolution on an empty stomach. This isn't a revolution. Jennifer, you're about to do something imperfect on purpose. For you, that's a revolution. He unpacked a bag on my cleared dining table. Bacon and egg tacos, potato and cheese, chorizo and bean. Eat first, plan second. We ate. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had breakfast tacos. They were messy, with salsa dripping onto my fingers, cheese melting everywhere. Perfectly imperfect. Okay, Marcus said, wiping his hands and pulling out his laptop. Let's start with what you know. Why a podcast about perfectionism? I thought about the stranger in the mirror. About 7 years of waiting. About that someday list that kept growing but never shrinking. Because I'm not the only one, I said slowly. There are thousands, maybe millions of people out there who are stuck in the same place I am, waiting to be ready, waiting to be perfect, waiting for permission that never comes, and we're all lying to ourselves, calling it preparation when really, it's just fear. Marcus was typing. Good. What else? We tell ourselves stories. So I'll start when I have more money. I'll do it when I have more time. I'll begin when I know more. But those are just excuses. The truth is, we're scared. Scared of failing. Scared of looking stupid. Scared of being seen before we're perfect. And we need to hear from people who did it anyway, who started scared, who failed publicly and survived, who chose messy action over perfect planning. The words were flowing now, the concept crystallizing. We need permission to be imperfect, evidence that it's okay to suck at something new, stories that prove done is better than perfect. Marcus looked up from his typing. That's your pitch. That's your whole show right there. I blinked. Really? Really? You just described exactly what you're going to do, and why it matters. Now we just need to figure out the how. He turned his laptop around. He'd created a simple document, the Imperfect podcast, working title, host, Jennifer Martinez, concept. Interviews with people who started before they were ready, target, recovering perfectionists, chronic planners, someday dreamers, launch, 30 days from today, first episode, TV, seeing it written out like that, concrete, real, documented, made my stomach flip. Working title? I asked. Everything's a working title until it's not. Don't get stuck on the name. That's perfectionism trying to sneak back in. He pulled up a new browser window. Let's start with the basics. What do you actually need to make a podcast? I had no idea. Okay, let me rephrase, Marcus said, reading my face. What do you think you need? A microphone. Good start. What else? Recording software. Editing software. A quiet place to record. A website. Artwork. Music. Guests who are willing to be interviewed by someone who has no idea what she's doing. The list kept growing in my head. Each item spawning 3 more items. The whole thing expanding into an overwhelming tsunami of prerequisites and requirements and... Stop, Marcus said gently. I stopped. You're doing the thing again. The perfectionist thing. Building a mountain before you take the first step. He closed his laptop. Here's what you actually need for day one. Your phone and a guest. That's it. My phone. Your phone has a voice recorder. Is it professional studio quality? No. Is it good enough to start? Absolutely. He stood up, walking to my window. You know what kills most new podcasts? They never launch. People spend months getting perfect equipment, perfect branding, perfect everything, and then they either run out of money or motivation or time, and the podcast dies before it's born. He turned back to me. Or, if they do launch, they've built it up so much in their heads that the first episode has to be perfect, and nothing is ever perfect enough. So they record 10 episodes and publish none, or they publish one, get 3 listeners, decide it's a failure and quit. That's depressing. That's reality. You know what's not depressing? Launching a messy, imperfect episode 1, then launching episode 2, then episode 3, getting a little better each time, learning by doing instead of learning by planning to do. I wanted to argue. My brain was already compiling all the reasons why this wouldn't work, why I needed proper equipment, why I should at least take a course or read some books or watch some tutorials before I... Jennifer. Marcus was standing in front of me now. What scares you more, launching an imperfect podcast, or waking up a year from now and realizing you never launched at all? The answer was immediate and visceral. Never launching, I whispered. Then we start now. Today. This minute. He pulled out his phone. I'm going to be your first guest. What? Interview me. About dropping out of college and starting my first business. About failing and starting again. About doing things before I was ready. He sat back down, setting his phone on the table. Go ahead, record. Ask me anything. My heart was pounding again. Marcus, I haven't prepared any questions. I don't have a structure. I don't even know how to... Perfect. So it'll be a real conversation instead of a script. He tapped his phone screen. Recording. Go. I stared at the phone, sitting between us, its voice recorder app now capturing every sound. This was insane. This wasn't how you were supposed to do things. You were supposed to research, plan, prepare, practice. Eventually is the graveyard of dreams, sweetheart. I took a breath. Okay, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Marcus, tell me about the moment you decided to drop out of college. And he did. For the next 47 minutes, my brother told me his story. Not the sanitized version he told at family dinners, but the real version. The terror he felt walking out of that engineering class for the last time. The night he spent crying in his car, convinced he'd just ruined his life. The first business idea that failed so spectacularly, he had to move back home for 6 months. The second idea that showed promise, but ran out of money. The third idea that almost worked, but fell apart due to a bad partnership. And finally, the fourth idea. The current company, the one that was working, not because he'd figured everything out, but because he'd failed enough times to know what not to do. The difference between me at 21 and me at 28 isn't that I got smarter, he said toward the end. It's that I got more comfortable being stupid. I gave up on looking like I knew what I was doing and just focused on actually doing it. He reached over and stopped the recording. There, he said, You just made your first podcast episode. I looked at his phone at the audio file that now existed in the world. 47 minutes of unscripted, unedited, completely imperfect conversation. That's it? I asked. That's it. Obviously you'll want to add an intro and outro, maybe some light editing if there are any major mistakes. But that's 90% of your first episode right there. But it's not. I stopped myself. Not what? Not perfect. Marcus grinned. Exactly. That's the whole point. You're launching a podcast about not waiting for perfect. If your podcast is perfect, you're a hypocrite. If it's imperfect, you're authentic. He sent the audio file to my phone. I watched it download. This piece of evidence that I'd actually done something instead of just planning to do it. 29 days left, Marcus said, packing up his laptop. What are you going to do with them? I looked at my notebook at the 2 steps I'd written. Step 1. Figure out what the hell I'm doing. Step 2. Do it anyway. I added a 3rd step. Step 3. Keep doing it, even when it feels scary. I'm going to record more episodes. I'm going to figure out the technical stuff as I go. I'm going to launch imperfectly in 30 days. Damn right you are. Marcus headed for the door, then paused. Hey Jen. Yeah, I'm proud of you. Not for what you're going to create, for who you're becoming. After he left, sat at my dining table for a long time, staring at the audio file on my phone, my first podcast episode, unpolished, unscripted, unset, real. I opened a new note in my phone and started a list. Things I need to figure out, but not right now. Podcast hosting platform, RSS feed, whatever that is, cover art, intro music, how to edit audio, how to promote, website, maybe social media strategy. Then I opened a different note. Things I'm doing today. Email 3 people about being guests. Listen to 3 podcasts to hear what I like. Write a rough intro script. Record the intro, badly if necessary. Research podcast hosting. 15 minutes max. Then decide. The second list felt manageable, concrete, actionable. I looked around my apartment. It looked the same as it had this morning. Neat, organized, perfect, but something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't a waiting room anymore. It was a starting line. My phone buzzed. An email from Robert, my manager. Jennifer, I hope everything is okay. Take the time you need. See you tomorrow. Robert. Short, professional, kind. He didn't guilt me, didn't make me feel bad about the last-minute absence, didn't question whether my reason was valid enough. Maybe I'd been so busy being perfect for everyone that I'd never given them the chance to be understanding. I replied, "Thank you. I appreciate it." Then I opened my email and started a new message. To Dr. Rachel Chen, A Mindful Journey. Subject, podcast interview request. Body. Hi Dr. Chen. You don't know me, but I attended your workshop on overcoming perfectionism last year. It changed how I think about growth and failure. I'm launching a podcast about people who started before they were ready, and I would love to interview you. The podcast is very new and very imperfect, but that's kind of the point. Would you be willing to talk with me? Jennifer Martinez. I read it over 3 times, looking for typos, awkward phrasing, anything that might make me sound unprofessional. Then I remembered, imperfect was the point. I hit send. 2 more emails, one to a local entrepreneur I'd met at a networking event, one to a former colleague who'd quit her stable job to travel the world for a year. 3 asks, 3 chances for rejection, 3 steps toward actually doing the thing instead of just planning to do it. By the time I'd finished, it was 11:30 a.m. On a normal day, I'd be in my second meeting by now, taking notes, managing projects, being reliable, Jennifer. Instead, I was sitting in my apartment, having recorded my first podcast episode, sent 3 interview requests, and taken an unplanned personal day for the first time in 7 years. I felt terrified. I felt guilty. I felt more alive than I'd been in years. My phone buzzed. A response already. From Dr. Chen. Jennifer, I remember you from the workshop. I'd be honored to be interviewed. I love that you're doing this imperfectly. That's where real growth happens. When works for you. I stared at the email. She said yes. An actual expert, someone I admired, had agreed to be interviewed by me. Someone who had 0 podcasting experience, and maybe 3 listeners, if I counted Marcus and my parents. My hands were shaking again, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from excitement. I had 29 days. I had 1 episode recorded, and 1 guest confirmed. I had no idea what I was doing, and for the first time in my adult life, that felt like exactly the right place to start. I pulled out my notebook and wrote Day 1. Started, imperfectly, scared, alive. Then I added 1 more line, tomorrow, keep going. The hardest part wasn't going to be the next 29 days. The hardest part was going to be every single day after that, when the novelty wore off and the old patterns tried to creep back in, when perfectionism whispered that I should stop until I was better, when fear suggested that I should wait until I had it figured out, that I was learning something crucial. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage was doing the thing while being afraid. Progress wasn't perfect. Progress was messy and uncertain and uncomfortable. And maybe, just maybe, that was the whole point. I looked at the stranger in my bathroom mirror that morning, the woman with empty eyes who'd been waiting for someday. She was still there, but she wasn't a stranger anymore. She was me, finally. Actually imperfectly me. And I was done waiting. Day 3 of the 30-day experiment, and I was already breaking, not in a dramatic, explosive way, in a quieter, more insidious way, the way perfectionism always broke you, slowly, subtly, with whispers that sounded like reason. It started Tuesday morning. I'd gone back to work, back to my cubicle at Technova, back to being reliable, Jennifer, who never missed deadlines and always had the answer, except now there was this other Jennifer, the one who'd taken an unplanned personal day, who'd recorded a podcast episode with 0 preparation, who'd sent interview requests to people she barely knew. The 2 Jennifers didn't quite fit in the same body anymore. You okay? Sarah from accounting asked, stopping by my desk around 10 a.m. You seem distracted. Fine, I said automatically. Just tired. But I wasn't tired. I was fractured. Half of me was reviewing budget projections and responding to emails. The other half was thinking about my podcast, about the interview with Dr. Chan I'd scheduled for Friday, about the intro script I'd attempted to write last night and deleted 4 times because it wasn't good enough. There was that word again, good enough. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Marcus, how's day 3? Me, working. Being productive. Marcus, that's not what I asked. How's the podcast? I stared at the screen. How was the podcast? I'd recorded 1 episode, scheduled 1 interview, made a list of things I needed to figure out, and then I'd stopped. For 2 whole days, I'd done nothing except think about doing things. Me, slow. Marcus. Translation. You're overthinking again. Me. I'm not overthinking. I'm being strategic. Marcus. Jennifer. Strategic is a fancy word for scared. I wanted to argue, but he was right. After the initial adrenaline rush of Monday, reality had set in. I'd listened to 3 professional podcasts, like I'd planned, and they were good, really good. Polished, edited, professional. The hosts knew what they were doing. Their questions flowed naturally. Their audio quality was pristine. Their content was valuable and well structured. Mine was none of those things. The episode I'd recorded with Marcus sat on my phone like an accusation. I'd listened to it once, and all I could hear were the mistakes, the awkward pauses, the times I said, the questions that went nowhere, the conversation that wandered off topic. It was amateur hour. It was embarrassing. It was real. But real wasn't enough, was it? Real didn't mean good. Real didn't mean valuable. Real didn't mean anyone would actually want to listen. Marcus, what are you doing tonight? Me, working late, playing catch-up from Monday. Marcus, wrong. You're coming to my office at 6, mandatory. Me, Marcus, I can't. Marcus, 6 p.m. Don't make me call Mom. He would do it too. I sighed and put my phone away. The rest of the day crawled by. Budget meetings, project updates, status reports, all the usual tasks that used to fill my time completely, but now felt hollow, like I was going through the motions of someone else's life. At 5:45, I packed my bag. Robert looked up from his desk as I passed. Heading out early? He asked, surprised. Jennifer Martinez never left before 6:30. Meeting my brother, I said. Good for you. Work-life balance. He smiled. You should do it more often. Should I? Could I? The old Jennifer would have stayed another 2 hours, would have made sure every email was answered, every task completed. But the old Jennifer had empty eyes and a someday list. Thanks, I said. See you tomorrow. The drive to Marcus's office took 23 minutes in rush hour traffic. He worked in a converted house in East Austin, one of those neighborhoods where tech startups and taco trucks coexisted in cheerful chaos. His company, True North Apps, occupied the main floor with its exposed brick walls, standing desks, and the mandatory startup decorations, motivational posters, a ping-pong table nobody used, and a coffee station that looked more complex than my car's dashboard. 3 young developers were still there when I arrived, hunched over laptops, hoodies up, headphones on. They barely glanced at me as Marcus waved me into his private office, a glass-walled corner that let him see everyone, while giving the illusion of privacy. "You're overthinking," he said, before I even sat down. "Hello to you too. I'm serious. I can see it on your face. You listened to your recording and decided it's not good enough." He leaned back in his chair. "Am I right?" I didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Let me tell you a story," Marcus said. "My first app, the one that failed spectacularly, I spent 6 months building it. 6 months of late nights, of learning to code, of perfecting every detail. I had beta testers sign NDAs. I created elaborate marketing materials. I built a website that won design awards. I remember, and when I finally launched it, you know how many people downloaded it in the first month? How many? 47. 47 people. After 6 months of work, he pulled up something on his computer and turned the screen toward me. "This is my current app, the successful one. You know how long I spent building the first version?" I shook my head. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of coding the most basic, bare-bones version possible. It was ugly. It crashed constantly. It did maybe 30% of what I eventually wanted it to do. He pointed at the screen, and you know how many people downloaded it in the first month? More than 47? 16. I got 16 downloads. He laughed. But those 16 people gave me feedback. Real, actual feedback. They told me what they needed, what was confusing, what was missing, and I fixed it. Then I got 32 downloads, then 64. Then it grew from there. Not because it was perfect, but because it was useful and getting better. I looked at the screen. True North's flagship app had over 200,000 downloads now. "The first version sucked," Marcus continued. "But it existed. That's the difference. Existence beats perfection every single time. That's easy to say when you're talking about an app. This is my voice. My ideas. Me. I heard the vulnerability in my words. When people hear my podcast, they're not judging some anonymous software. They're judging me." "Good," Marcus said. "Good. Yeah, good, because that means it matters to you. If you didn't care what people thought, you wouldn't be scared. And if you're not scared, you're probably not doing anything worth doing." One of his developers knocked on the glass wall. Marcus waved him in. "Sorry to interrupt," the kid said. He couldn't have been more than 22. "That bug with the payment system. I tried fixing it 3 different ways, and they all broke something else. I think I need to start over." Marcus didn't even hesitate. "Okay, start over, but I spent all day on this, and now you know. 3 ways that don't work. That's not wasted time. That's progress." Marcus smiled. "Did the app crash?" "Well, yeah, but did anyone lose data?" "No. Did you learn something?" The kid nodded, reluctantly. "Then you did your job. Try again tomorrow. Fail faster." Marcus turned back to me as the developer left. "You hear that? Fail faster. That's the whole secret. Try things, break things, learn things, repeat until it works." That's a nice philosophy for software. People expect more from content. Do they, though? Marcus pulled out his phone. "Come here. I want to show you something." I walked around his desk. He opened YouTube and searched for first podcast episode. "Watch this," he said, clicking on a video. It was a guy in his bedroom, recording on his laptop's built-in microphone. The audio quality was terrible. He kept saying, and like. His cat meowed loudly in the background. It was objectively not good. Check the views, Marcus said. 84,700. Now look at his channel. The guy now had 2.3 million subscribers. His recent videos were professionally produced with multiple cameras and studio lighting. But that first video, that terrible amateur first video, was still there. Know what the top comment is? Marcus scrolled down. Someone wrote, "I've been following you since this video. Watching you grow has inspired me to start my own channel." It has 24,000 likes. He showed me 3 more examples. A woman who started a cooking channel using her phone propped against a cookbook. A teacher who recorded educational videos in her classroom after school, with kids occasionally bursting in. A financial advisor whose first video was literally him sitting in his car during lunch break, talking to his dashboard camera. All of them now had huge, engaged audiences. All of them started imperfectly. People don't connect with polish, Marcus said. They connect with progress, with realness, with someone who's brave enough to show up before they're ready. I thought about that, about the podcasts I'd listened to, the ones that had made me feel inadequate. They were good, really good. But they hadn't made me feel inspired. They'd made me feel small. What if I put something out there and nobody listens? I asked quietly. And you'll be like 90% of podcasts. Most podcasts have fewer than 100 listeners. Most blogs have even fewer readers. Most YouTube channels never crack 1,000 subscribers. He looked at me seriously. But here's the thing, that's the wrong question. What's the right question? The right question is, will you be more proud of yourself for trying and failing, or for never trying at all? He paused. Because I guarantee you, 5 years from now, you won't regret the imperfect podcast you launched, but you will regret the perfect podcast you never started. Eventually is the graveyard of dreams. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio file from Monday. Play it for me, I said. What? The episode? I need to hear it, with someone else here, so I can't lie to myself about how bad it is. Marcus looked surprised, but took my phone and hit play. For 47 minutes, we listened. I heard all the flaws I'd obsessed over, my nervous laughter, the rambling tangents, the questions that could have been sharper, the moments where Marcus had to save me from my own awkwardness. But I also heard something else. I had a real conversation. 2 people who loved each other being honest about fear and failure. Marcus's voice, when he talked about crying in his car. You couldn't fake that vulnerability. My voice when I admitted I didn't know how to give up on Perfect. That wasn't polished, but it was true. And truth, I was starting to realize, mattered more than perfection. When it ended, Marcus looked at me. Well, it's not as bad as I remembered. It's not bad at all. It's human. And that makes it better than 90% of the overproduced content out there. He handed my phone back. So what are you going to do with it? I looked at the audio file, at the physical evidence that I'd done something instead of just planning to do something. I'm going to edit it, I said slowly. Not to make it perfect, just to add an intro and outro. And then I took a breath. This was it, the real moment of commitment, the point of no return. And then I'm going to publish it. Marcus grinned. When? The old Jennifer would have said. Next week, or once I figure out a few more things, or after I record at least 3 more episodes, so I have a buffer. The new Jennifer, the one who was learning to fail faster, said Friday. I'll publish it Friday. 4 days from now. 4 days from now, I confirmed. We shook hands across his desk, and I felt that familiar loosening in my chest, fear and excitement mixing into something that felt dangerously close to hope. I have homework for you, Marcus said. Before Friday, I want you to do 3 things, okay? 1. Record your intro and outro. They don't have to be perfect, they just have to exist. He held up a second finger. 2. Figure out where you're going to host the podcast. Pick a platform and set it up. Don't research for hours. Give yourself 30 minutes max, then choose. And 3. Tell someone other than me that you're launching a podcast. Make it real by saying it out loud to another human being. That third one scared me most. Telling Marcus was safe. He was my brother. He'd encouraged this whole thing. Telling someone else meant admitting to the wider world that I was doing something imperfect. It meant the possibility of judgment, of people thinking I was foolish or presumptuous or not ready, which of course was exactly why I needed to do it. Deal, I said. Wednesday and Thursday passed in a blur of secret podcast work. I felt like a double agent, living 2 lives simultaneously. At the office, I was regular Jennifer, attending meetings, updating spreadsheets, responding to emails within 15 minutes of receiving them. My colleagues saw the same efficient, reliable person they'd always known, but in the mornings before work, during lunch breaks, and late into the evenings, I was someone else entirely, a woman hunched over her laptop, teaching herself podcast editing with YouTube tutorials, recording intro scripts over and over, researching hosting platforms with a timer set for exactly 30 minutes. I chose Podbean on minute 27, not because it was objectively the best, but because it looked straightforward and offered a free trial. Good enough. The intro was harder. I recorded it 17 times on Wednesday night, each attempt feeling forced or fake, or too casual, or too formal. My voice sounded weird. My pacing was off. The words felt clunky. On take 18, I stopped trying to make it good, and just tried to make it honest. Hi, I'm Jennifer Martinez, and I spent most of my adult life waiting to be ready, waiting to have enough money, enough knowledge, enough confidence to start living the life I said I wanted. And then one morning, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. This podcast is about what happened next. It's about learning to start before you're ready, to do things imperfectly, to fail faster and grow stronger. If you're tired of waiting for someday, if you're ready to begin before you feel ready, then this show is for you. Welcome to the Imperfect Start. Take 18. That was the one. Not because it was perfect, but because it was true. The outro was easier. I kept it simple. Thanks for listening to the Imperfect Start. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. And if you're working on starting something before you're ready, tell me about it. Let's be imperfect together. Thursday night, I put it all together. The intro, the conversation with Marcus, the outro. I used free editing software that I barely understood, cutting out a few long pauses and one section where Marcus's phone rang, but otherwise leaving it raw and real. The final file was 41 minutes, and 37 seconds long. Episode 1 of The Imperfect Start, featuring my brother talking about failure, fear, and the courage to begin. I uploaded it to Podbean, but didn't publish it yet. Friday, I'd promised. Friday, I'd push that button and make it real, which left Marcus's third assignment: tell someone else about the podcast. Friday morning, I arrived at work at 7:30, half an hour earlier than usual. The office was mostly empty, just a few early birds scattered across the open floor plan. I made coffee, real coffee, not the decaf I usually switch to by mid-morning, and sat at my desk, staring at my phone. Who could I tell? Most of my friends were acquaintances from work or college classmates I'd lost touch with. My parents would be supportive, but also worried, concerned about my stable job and practical future. Marcus already knew. That left Dr. Rachel Chen, who I was scheduled to interview this afternoon, or Sarah from accounting. Sarah was a wild card. We'd worked together for 5 years, shared the same lunch hour, occasionally grabbed coffee, but I didn't really know her beyond work. She was efficient, friendly, professional, basically a mirror of who I'd been trying to be for 7 years. I found her at her desk at 8 a.m., already deep into spreadsheets. "Hey Sarah, got a minute?" I asked. She looked up, surprised. "Sure. What's up?" I sat in the chair across from her desk, my heart pounding. This was ridiculous. Why was I so nervous? It was just a podcast, just a small creative project, I'm launching a podcast, I blurted out. Sarah blinked. "Really? Wow, that's cool. What's it about?" "It's about starting things before you're ready, about perfectionism and procrastination, and learning to do things imperfectly." The words were tumbling out. Now, I'm interviewing people who began before they felt prepared, who failed and kept going, who chose action over endless planning. That sounds amazing. Sarah's face lit up with genuine interest. "When does it launch?" "Today. This afternoon. It's probably not very good. It's my first time doing anything like this, but I'm doing it anyway." "Jennifer," Sarah leaned forward. "Can I tell you something?" I nodded. "I've been writing a novel for 6 years. 6 years. I have 70,000 words written, maybe 3/4 of a complete draft, and I haven't let a single person read it because it's not finished. It's not good enough. It's not ready." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound, except I'm starting to realize it will never feel ready. I'll tinker with it forever if I don't just stop and share it. "Why don't you?" I asked. "Because I'm terrified," she said it simply without drama. What if I've spent 6 years writing something no one wants to read? What if it's terrible? What if I'm not actually a writer, just someone who's been playing at being a writer? I understood that fear intimately. It was the same fear that had kept me frozen for 7 years. The same fear that had almost stopped me from starting this podcast. What if it's wonderful? I countered. What if you are a writer and the only thing stopping you is your own fear? Sarah stared at me for a moment, then she pulled out her phone. "What's your podcast called?" "The Imperfect Start." She typed it in. "I'm setting a reminder to listen today, and I'm making you a promise. If you actually launch this today, if you actually do this scary thing, Then I'm gonna send my manuscript to 3 people this weekend. Real people who will give me real feedback. Sarah, deal. I thought about Marcus's bet, about how accountability worked both ways, about how sometimes we needed witnesses to our bravery. Deal, I said. We shook hands across her desk. 2 professional women in business casual, making a pact to be imperfect. The interview with Dr. Rachel Chen was scheduled for 4 p.m. at a quiet cafe called Genuine Joe's, another Austin institution that Marcus had recommended. I'd taken a half day of vacation, using my vacation time, what a concept, and arrived 20 minutes early to scout the location. Too loud. The espresso machine hissed constantly. Was that going to ruin the audio? Too echoey? The high ceilings might cause sound issues. Too public? What if people overheard and judged my amateur questions? I was spiraling again, perfectionism trying to sabotage me with legitimate sounding concerns. I forced myself to breathe and remember, done was better than perfect. An episode recorded in a noisy cafe was better than an episode not recorded at all. Dr. Chen arrived exactly on time. A slim woman in her 50s, with silver streaked hair and the kind of calm presence that made you immediately trust her. I recognized her from the workshop I'd attended, one of those continuing education events my company had sponsored back when I thought the right knowledge would finally make me ready. Jennifer, she said warmly, shaking my hand. It's so good to see you again. I'm excited for this conversation. Thank you so much for agreeing to this. I should warn you, I'm very new to podcasting. This is literally my second interview. Perfect. Then we're both learning something. She sat down, declining my offer to buy her coffee. I brought my own tea. So, where should we start? I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder app, and set it between us. My list of prepared questions sat in my notebook, carefully researched and ordered, but looking at Dr. Chen's kind, expectant face, I decided to ignore the script. Tell me about a time you started something before you were ready, I said. She smiled. My entire career. I started my private practice 2 years out of graduate school, when every mentor told me I needed at least 5 more years of experience. I started teaching workshops after only 3 years of practice, when conventional wisdom said 10 years minimum. I wrote my first book based on just 4 years of clinical data, when publishers wanted 15. Why did you start early? Because I realized something crucial. There's no such thing as ready. Ready is a myth we tell ourselves to justify staying in our comfort zone. She leaned forward. Think about it. When are you ready to be a parent? When are you ready to start a business? When are you ready to write a book, or launch a podcast, or change careers? The answer is never. You're never fully ready. You just reach a point where the pain of staying the same exceeds the fear of change. I thought about the stranger in my mirror, the empty eyes, the someday list. But isn't there value in preparation? I asked. In learning and planning before you leap? Absolutely. There's a difference between preparation and procrastination. Preparation has an endpoint. Procrastination doesn't. She pulled out a small notebook. Apparently we both like to have physical paper on hand. I teach my clients to ask 3 questions. 1. What's the minimum I need to know to start? 2. What can I only learn by doing? And 3. What am I using as an excuse versus what's a legitimate requirement? Can you explain that third one? Sure. Let's say you want to start a business. A legitimate requirement might be having enough savings to cover 6 months of expenses. An excuse would be waiting until you have a perfect business plan, or until the market conditions are ideal, or until you've read 50 more books on entrepreneurship. She smiled. The excuse feels like preparation, but it's actually fear wearing a respectable disguise. I felt that in my bones. How many times had I convinced myself that I needed just one more course, one more book, one more year of saving before I could start my consulting business? How do you push through the fear? I asked. You don't. You bring it with you. Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. People think courage means not being afraid, but courage means being afraid and doing it anyway. Fear is information. It tells you that something matters to you. The question isn't how to eliminate fear. The question is how to act despite it. We talked for an hour about the neuroscience of perfectionism, about how our brains are wired to avoid uncertainty, about practical strategies for overcoming the paralysis of waiting. Dr. Chen shared stories from her practice. Clients who'd spent years preparing to live and then one day realized they were running out of time. The saddest thing I see in my practice isn't people who fail, she said near the end. It's people who never try, who let their lives be narrated by fear instead of desire, who reach the end and realize they spent all their time getting ready but never actually showed up. When I stopped the recording, I felt simultaneously exhausted and energized. This was nothing like the casual conversation with Marcus. This was deeper, richer, more challenging. It was also definitely imperfect. I'd fumbled some questions, lost my train of thought twice, and said, "That's interesting," so many times it had become comical. But we'd covered real territory. We'd gone somewhere true. "Thank you," I said to Dr. Chen. This meant a lot. Thank you for doing this. For starting before you were ready. That takes courage. She stood to leave, then paused. Can I give you one piece of advice? Please. Don't wait to launch until you have 10 episodes. Don't wait until you have perfect audio quality. Don't wait till you're sure it's good. She looked at me intently. Launch now. Launch messy. Because the world needs more people willing to be imperfect in public. It gives the rest of us permission to try. After she left, I sat in the cafe for a long time, staring at my phone. 2 episodes now. One with Marcus, one with Dr. Chen. Neither one perfect, both of them real. It was 5:47 p.m. Marcus had texted 3 times. Marcus, did you do it? Marcus. Jennifer Ann Martinez. Did you launch? Marcus, I swear if you chickened out, I opened Podbean on my phone. The episode was there, uploaded, ready. All I had to do was hit publish. My finger hovered over the button. This was it. Once I pushed this button, there was no taking it back. People would listen. People would judge. People might hate it, or ignore it, or think I was foolish for trying. Or, and this was somehow more terrifying, people might like it, might be encouraged by it, might start their own imperfect projects, because I'd been brave enough to start mine. I thought about Sarah and her novel. about old Tom and his 15 years of waiting, about Dr. Chen's words. The world needs more people willing to be imperfect in public. I thought about the stranger in the mirror who'd been waiting for someday, and I pushed publish. The Imperfect Start, Episode 1, Starting Scared, with Martinez, was now live on the internet. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing. I felt like I might throw up. I also felt more alive than I'd been in 7 years. I texted Marcus. It's done. His response was immediate. Link. Now. I sent him the link. Then I sent it to Sarah. Then, before I could second guess myself, I sent it to my parents with a simple message. Started something new. Love you. My phone started buzzing immediately. Marcus calling. You actually did it, he said when I answered. Holy shit, you actually did it. I actually did it. How do you feel? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Terrified. Exposed. Vulnerable. I paused. Free. That's the feeling. That's what living actually feels like. I could hear the grin in his voice. Welcome back to life, Jen. We hung up, and I sat there in genuine joys as the evening crowd filtered in. Students with laptops, couples on dates, people living their ordinary, extraordinary lives. I opened my podcast app and searched for my own show. There it was. The Imperfect Start, 1 episode, 0 reviews, probably 0 downloads, except Marcus listening to confirm it worked. It was the most imperfect, amateur, uncertain thing I'd ever created. It was also the thing I was most proud of. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Sarah, listening now. You sound nervous and real, and I love it. And I just emailed my manuscript to 3 people. We're doing this. Another text from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. Hi Jennifer, this is Rachel Chen. I just listened to your episode with your brother. It made me cry. Thank you for having the courage to be so honest. The world needs this. Keep going. Dr. Chen had listened already, had taken the time to find my number from our email exchange and reach out. Had been moved enough to cry. Maybe I was doing this right after all. Not perfectly, but right. I walked to my car in the fading Austin light, past food trucks, sending up smoke signals, past musicians setting up for the evening, past people being beautifully, messily, imperfectly human. I had 25 days left in my experiment, 1 episode published, 1 interview recorded, a promise to Sarah to hold each other accountable, and for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't waiting for someday. Someday was now, day 12, and everything was falling apart, not in the dramatic way I'd feared. No public humiliation, no viral mockery, no catastrophic failure that justified all my years of waiting. It was worse than that. It was the slow grinding realization that doing the thing was just the beginning. The real work, the unsexy, unglamorous, relentless work came after. The Imperfect Start had been live for a week. I'd published 3 episodes. Marcus, Dr. Chen, and a 3rd interview with my former colleague Amanda, who'd quit her corporate job to travel for a year. Each episode represented hours of work recording, editing, uploading, writing descriptions, creating social media posts. and my total listener count, according to Podbean's analytics, 47. 47 downloads across 3 episodes. Some of those were probably Marcus listening multiple times. Some were my parents. Some were me, checking to make sure the audio actually worked. I sat at my desk at Technola, staring at the analytics dashboard on my phone, feeling the familiar weight of disappointment settling over me like a heavy blanket. This was why people waited to be ready. This was why people prepared and planned and perfected before launching, because launching imperfectly meant facing the reality that imperfect things often went unnoticed. "You okay?" Robert asked, stopping by my cubicle. "You've been staring at your phone for 10 minutes. I locked the screen quickly. "Fine, just distracted. Everything all right?" Everything all right at home? Everything's fine, but everything wasn't fine. The double life I'd been living for the past 12 days was starting to crack. At work, I was still reliable, Jennifer, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. I found myself watching the clock, counting down the hours until I could leave and work on the podcast. Meanwhile, the podcast itself was a study in diminishing returns. Each episode took more effort to produce and reached fewer people. The math was brutal. If I continued at this pace, I'd have maybe 200 listeners by the end of the 30 days. Was that success? Was that enough? Was it worth the time, energy, and emotional vulnerability I was pouring into it? My phone buzzed. Sarah from accounting. "Sarah." "Lunch. I need to talk." "Me. Daily grind at noon." "Sarah." "Perfect." Sarah was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table in the back corner, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen her. Her usually neat hair was in a messy ponytail, her blazer was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "You look terrible," I said, sitting down. "Right back at you." She pushed a coffee toward me. She'd already ordered. "I've been up until 3 a.m. every night this week reading feedback on my manuscript. The 3 people you sent it to turned into 12 people. One of them shared it with her book club without asking. Then someone in the book club is married to a literary agent and passed it along." She laughed, a slightly manic sound. "I went from 6 years of nobody reading my work to 12 strangers dissecting it in a week." "Sarah, that's amazing." "It's terrifying. Do you know what it feels like to have people criticize something you've poured your soul into for 6 years?" Her hands were shaking around her coffee cup. "They're not mean about it. They're constructive, professional, but every piece of feedback feels like someone pointing out how I failed." I understood that feeling intimately. Every time I checked my podcast analytics, every time an episode got fewer downloads than the last, it felt like confirmation that I'd been right to wait, right to prepare, right to believe I wasn't ready. "What kind of feedback?" I asked. "The first 3 chapters are slow. The protagonist is too passive in the beginning. There's a plot hole in chapter 7. The romance subplot feels rushed." She ticked items off on her fingers. All valid, all true, all things I somehow didn't see, despite reading the manuscript 40 times. But they're still reading it, right? That's the weird part. Despite all the criticism, everyone says they want to keep reading. They want to know what happens. They're invested. She looked at me with exhausted, overwhelmed eyes. The agent, the actual literary agent, wants to see the whole manuscript Once I addressed the feedback, a real agent, Jennifer, this could actually happen. Then why do you look like your world is ending? Because now I have to fix it. I have to make it better, and I don't know if I can. She took a shaky breath. For 6 years, the manuscript was this perfect potential thing. It could have been anything, could have been great. Now it's real, and it's messy, and it's not as good as I wanted it to be, and I have to face that. I reached across the table and took her hand. Sarah, you spent 6 years protecting yourself from this exact moment. From the moment when your work exists in the world and isn't perfect. But you know what? You're here. You did the scary thing. You're in the arena. The arena sucks. Yeah, I agreed. It really does. We sat in silence for a moment, two women who'd chosen to be imperfect in public, learning that the choice came with consequences. How's the podcast? Sarah asked. Finally, 47 downloads. Is that good? I have no idea. I pulled up the analytics on my phone, showing her. Most podcasts fail. I read that somewhere. Something like 90% never make it past episode 10. The successful ones have thousands of listeners, millions, if they're really good. And you have 47, and I have 47. I stared at the number. I keep telling myself it doesn't matter, that I'm doing this for the right reasons, that it's about the process, not the outcome. That done is better than perfect, but I'm human, and humans want validation. We want proof that our work matters, that our vulnerability wasn't wasted, that someone out there gives a damn. I locked my phone, and 47 people, most of whom probably know me personally, isn't exactly overwhelming validation. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Tell me about person number 47. What? Person number 47. The stranger who downloaded your podcast. Not Marcus, or your parents, or me. The actual stranger. Tell me about them. I don't know who they are. The analytics don't tell me. Exactly. So imagine them." Sarah leaned forward. "Imagine it's someone like us. Someone who's been waiting for years to start something. Someone who's terrified and making excuses. Someone who's convinced they need to be ready before they begin." I closed my eyes and tried to picture them. A woman, though it could be a man, sitting in her car during lunch break, scrolling through podcast apps, looking for something, looking for permission, looking for proof that it's okay to be scared and do it anyway. She finds your podcast, Sarah continued, and she listens to you talking about looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger, about 7 years at a temporary job, about a Sunday list that kept growing, and she thinks, "That's me, that's exactly me." I could see her so clearly now, could feel what she was feeling, that recognition, that relief of knowing you're not alone. And maybe, Sarah said softly, maybe your podcast gives her the courage to start, to take one small step toward the life she wants. Maybe she signs up for that class she's been thinking about for 3 years. Maybe she sends that email she's been drafting for 6 months. Maybe she just begins. One person whose life you change. Would that be enough? Would that justify the vulnerability?
I thought about it, really thought about it. If I could know for certain that my podcast had helped one person start something they'd been afraid to start, would it matter that 46 other people had downloaded it and probably never listened.
Yes, I said finally. That would be enough. Then stop counting downloads like they're a scoreboard. Start thinking about them as 47 potential lives touched. 47 possible moments of courage. 47 chances to matter. She was right. Somewhere in my obsession with metrics and analytics, I'd lost sight of why I started this in the first place. Not to be famous, not to be successful by some external measure, but to stop waiting, to live before I was ready, to prove it was possible, and I had proved it. Every single episode was proof. Every imperfect recording, every awkward edit, every vulnerable moment, all of it was evidence that done was better than perfect. My phone buzzed. An email notification from unknown subject. Thank you for your podcast. I almost didn't open it. Probably spam. Probably some automated message from Podbean. But Sarah was watching, so I tapped it. Hi Jennifer. You don't know me. I found your podcast yesterday while searching for overcoming perfectionism. I've been sitting on a business idea for 4 years. 4 years of planning, researching, preparing. 4 years of waiting to be ready. I listened to your first 3 episodes this morning during my commute. And when I got to work, I did something I've been too scared to do. I called the Small Business Administration and scheduled an appointment to discuss LLC formation. It's a small step. Maybe nothing will come of it, but I took it because you took yours. Because you showed me that imperfect action beats perfect inaction. Thank you for being brave enough to start before you were ready. You gave me permission to do the same. David, I read it 3 times. Sarah watched my face change. Good news? She asked. I handed her my phone. Wordlessly, she read it, and when she looked up, her eyes were wet. Person number 47, she said. Person number 47. We sat there in the daily grind, 2 women learning the lesson that can only be learned by doing, that impact isn't measured in metrics, that success isn't determined by algorithms, that sometimes, often, the work that matters most reaches the smallest number of people in the deepest way. I'm going to finish my revisions, Sarah said. Even if they're imperfect, even if the agent ultimately passes, even if it never gets published, because 12 people read my work and wanted more, and that's not nothing. That's definitely not nothing. And you're going to keep making episodes? I thought about David Orr, sitting in traffic, listening to my nervous, imperfect voice, talking about fear and courage. I thought about the appointment he'd scheduled because I'd had the courage to start. Yeah, I said, I'm going to keep making episode. Day 17. The podcast had been live for 12 days. Total downloads, 63. 3 more emails from strangers telling me the show had helped them. 4 reviews on Apple Podcast. 3 5 stars and 1 3-star that said good message, but audio quality could be better. They weren't wrong about the audio quality. I was learning that one of the hardest parts of doing something imperfectly was continuing to do it, while slowly getting better. There was a temptation to stop, to say, I'll wait until I can afford better equipment, or I'll pause until I learn better editing. But that was just perfectionism wearing a different disguise. So I kept going. Episode 4, an interview with a local entrepreneur who'd started 3 businesses, failed at 2. Episode 5. A teacher who'd started a side hustle, selling printable lesson plans, and now made more from that than her teaching salary. Episode 6. Back to basics. Just me talking about the difference between preparation and procrastination. That solo episode was the hardest. No guest to bounce off, no one to save me from awkward pauses or rambling tangents. Just me, my laptop's built-in microphone, and 43 minutes of unfiltered thoughts about fear and courage, and the lies we tell ourselves. I almost didn't publish it, almost deleted it, and started over. Almost convinced myself it wasn't good enough. But I thought about David R. taking his small step, about Sarah revising her manuscript despite the criticism, about Marcus failing at 3 businesses before finding success, and I published it. The solo episode got 22 downloads in the first day, more than any previous episode. 3 people emailed to say it was their favorite so far. One person said, "This is exactly what I needed to hear today. You articulated things I've been feeling for years, but couldn't name." I was starting to understand something crucial. The episodes I was most scared to publish were often the ones that resonated most, because the things I was scared to say were usually the things other people were scared to admit feeling. Vulnerability created connection. Imperfection created permission. Courage created courage. Day 21. 3/4 through my 30-day experiment, I met Marcus at his office after work. He texted earlier, "Need to show you something. Bring beer." I stopped at a convenience store and grabbed a 6-pack of local IPA. Austin had no shortage of craft breweries, and found him in his glass-walled office, staring at his laptop with an unreadable expression. "Beer delivery," I announced, setting the 6-pack on his desk. He cracked one open without looking away from the screen. "You need to see this." I walked around to his side of the desk. He'd pulled up a podcast directory I'd never heard of, some ranking site that tracked new shows. "Scroll down to number 47, he said. I scrolled and stared. The Imperfect Start was ranked 47th in the new and noteworthy category for self-improvement podcasts. That's how I manage. You're trending. Your episode download rate has been increasing steadily for the past week. Not exponentially, but consistently. 5% growth every day. He pulled up a graph showing my numbers climbing from 47 to 63 to 81 to 104. You're at 163 total downloads now. And that solo episode you published yesterday, it's being shared. Shared? He switched to Twitter, or X, as it was now called. So everyone still said Twitter. Someone had posted, "Just found out the Imperfect Start podcast. Real talk about perfectionism without the toxic positivity." Episode 6 hit different. It had 83 likes and 23 retweets. "You're not going viral," Marcus clarified, "but you're getting noticed. Slowly. Organically. The way real things grow." I sat down in his guest chair, feeling slightly dizzy. 163 people. 163 people who chose your show out of millions of podcasts available, who listened to your voice in their ears during their commute or workout or lunch break, who decided your Imperfect Start was worth their time. I cracked open a beer, needing something to do with my hands. "I don't know what to do with this." "What do you mean?" I mean, I started this to prove I could do something before I was ready, to beat perfectionism, to stop waiting. But now it's becoming something. People are listening, people I don't know, people who might have expectations. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me. You're scared it's going to succeed. That's ridiculous, is it? Think about it. If it stays small, you can always tell yourself it didn't matter. It was just an experiment, a personal growth exercise. But if it actually works, if people actually care, then it becomes real. Then you have to keep doing it. Then you can't hide behind this is just practice. He was right, and I hated it. Success comes with pressure, I said quietly, with expectations, with the risk of letting people down.
Yep.
And failure comes with shame and disappointment and the confirmation of your worst fears about yourself. Marcus took a long drink of his beer. Those are your options, the risks of success or the risks of failure. There's no third option where you stay safe and nothing bad happens. That's not how life works. We sat in silence for a moment. The sounds of his developers working outside the glass walls creating a background hum of productivity. You know what scares me most? I said finally. What? That I'll succeed at this podcast thing, and then I'll have to figure out what comes next. Starting was hard, but continuing, growing, actually building something sustainable, that's terrifying. Marcus smiled. Welcome to entrepreneurship. The fun never stops. How do you do it? How do you keep going when it gets hard? He thought about that. Honestly, I remind myself that hard is better than empty. Running this company is stressful. I work 60-hour weeks sometimes. I have employees depending on me. I have clients who expect results. There's pressure and uncertainty and constant challenges. He gestured around his office. But I'd rather be stressed about something that matters than comfortable in something that doesn't. You know, I did know. The past 21 days had been some of the most stress of my life, but they'd also been the most alive I'd felt since I couldn't remember when. 9 days left, Marcus said. You're gonna make it. I'm going to make it. And then what? That was the real question, wasn't it? The 30-day experiment was almost over. I'd proven I could start before I was ready. I'd launched imperfectly. I'd done the scary thing. But life wasn't a 30-day experiment. It was an ongoing practice. A series of choices to keep beginning, keep trying, keep showing up even when it was hard. Then I keep going, I said. Not because I have to, because I want. Marcus raised his beer. Today, 21. And to all the days after. We clinked bottles. And I felt something shift inside me. Not a dramatic transformation. Not a sudden enlightenment. Just a quiet recognition that I'd crossed some invisible threshold. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was doing, imperfectly, messily, uncertainly, but actually doing, and that made all the difference. Day 24. 6 days, until the experiment ended. I sat in my cubicle at Tech Nova, staring at my computer screen without really seeing it. A budget spreadsheet was open in front of me, cells full of numbers that needed to be reconciled, but my mind was elsewhere, on the podcast, on the emails from strangers, on the growing realization that my temporary job had become increasingly intolerable. 7 years I'd worked here. 7 years of telling myself it was temporary, 7 years of waiting to save enough money, gain enough experience, build enough confidence to leave and start something of my own. But the podcast had changed the equation. In 24 days, I'd built something more meaningful than anything I'd done in 7 years at Technova. Not bigger, not more profitable, not more secure, but more authentic, more aligned with who I actually was versus who I thought I should be. My phone buzzed. An email from someone named Patricia Lee, sent to the contact address on my podcast website. Jennifer, I'm a literary agent at Sterling Creative Agency in New York. I've been listening to the Imperfect start for the past week, and I'm impressed by your ability to articulate the perfectionism trap in accessible, relatable ways. Have you considered expanding this concept into a book? I think there's significant market potential for a practical guide to starting before you're ready, especially if it maintains the authentic, vulnerable tone of your podcast. If you're interested in exploring this possibility, I'd love to schedule a call. There's Patricia Lee. I read it 3 times. A literary agent asking about a book. A real agent from a real agency suggesting I had something worth expanding. This was impossible. This didn't happen to people like me, people who'd started a podcast 24 days ago with 0 experience and amateur equipment, people who'd launched imperfectly and continued imperfectly and were just figuring it out as they went, except it was happening right now, in this moment. I forwarded the email to Marcus and Sarah simultaneously with no message, just the email. Marcus called immediately. Holy shit, I know, Jennifer. This is real. This is actually happening. I don't know how to write a book. I've never written anything longer than a work report. So, you didn't know how to make a podcast either. Didn't stop you. He was right. 3 weeks ago, I couldn't have imagined launching a podcast. Now I had 6 episodes published, 163 downloads, turning into 238, and a literary agent emailing me about a book deal. What could I do in 3 months? 6 months? A year? I'm terrified, I admitted. Good. Fear means it matters. What are you going to tell her? I looked around my cubicle at the motivational poster on my wall that I'd stopped actually seeing years ago, at the family photo on my desk from a vacation I barely remembered, at the stack of projects I'd been working on, important to Technova, meaningless to me. I'm gonna say yes, I said, and then I'm gonna quit my job. Marcus was silent for a moment. Then, you're serious? I'm serious. Not today. Not until I have a plan. But soon. The decision was forming as I spoke, solidifying into clarity. I've been at this temporary job for 7 years, Marcus. 7 years of waiting to be ready to leave. And I'm never going to be ready. So I'm just going to do it. What about money? Insurance? Security? I have savings. I can freelance while I write the book. I can figure it out. I stood up, suddenly needing to move. I spent my whole life choosing security over meaning. And you know what security got me? Empty eyes and a Sunday list. So yeah, I'm scared, but I'm more scared of waking up in another 7 years and realizing I'm still here, still waiting, still preparing to start living. When? Marcus asked. End of the 30 days. I'll give notice the day after the experiment ends. Then I'll have a month, to transition, train my replacement, wrap things up properly. The plan was coming together in real time, and then I'm going to write a book, badly, probably, imperfectly, definitely, but I'm going to do it. I'm proud of you, Marcus said quietly. Don't. I haven't actually done anything yet. I'm just talking about it. No, you're deciding. That's different. Talking is someday I'll quit and write a book. Deciding is I'm quitting on this specific date to write a book, completely different. He was right. The decision changed everything. It transformed my temporary job from an endless holding pattern into a finish line. 6 more weeks. Then I was free. I have to go, I said. I need to respond to Patricia before I lose my nerve. Do it now. Right now. Don't give yourself time to talk yourself out of it. I hung up and pulled up Patricia's email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was insane. I'd published 6 podcast episodes. 6. And now I was going to respond to a literary agent as if I had any business writing a book, as if I knew what I was doing. As if I was ready, but that was the point, wasn't it? I wasn't ready. I'd never be ready. Ready was a myth. I started typing. Hi, Patricia. Thank you so much for reaching out. I'm honored that you've been listening to the podcast and see potential in expanding the concept. I'd love to schedule a call to discuss this further. I should mention that I've never written a book before and honestly have no idea what I'm doing, but that's kind of the whole thesis of my work, so it seems appropriately imperfect. I'm available next week, if that works for you. Best, Jennifer. I read it over once. It was too casual, too self-deprecating, too honest about my lack of experience. Perfect. I hit send before I could revise it. Day 30. The end of the experiment. The beginning of everything else. I woke up at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before my alarm. The way you do on important days, when your body refuses to let you oversleep. For a moment, I lay there in the pre-dawn darkness, listening to the sounds of Austin waking up outside my window. Distant traffic, a neighbor's dog barking, the hum of the city stirring to life. 30 days ago, I'd looked in a mirror and seen a stranger, a woman with empty eyes who'd spent 7 years waiting for someday, a woman who believed in preparation and planning and being ready before beginning, a woman who had convinced herself that careful was the same as wise, that waiting was the same as strategizing. That woman was gone, not replaced by some perfectly transformed version, not suddenly confident and fearless, uncertain, but changed nonetheless, fundamentally, irrevocably changed. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. The Imperfect starts analytics dashboard loaded automatically, a habit I'd developed over the past month, checking first thing every morning, like some people check the weather. Total downloads. I stared at the number. 1,847 people had listened to my voice, had chosen to spend their time, their precious, irreplaceable time, hearing my stories about fear and courage, and starting before you're ready. It wasn't viral. It wasn't a million downloads. It wasn't going to make me famous, or rich, or transform me into some podcasting sensation. But it was real. It was mine. And it mattered. 17 emails waited in my podcast inbox. I scrolled through them. Your episode on perfectionism made me cry in my car. I've been planning to start a business for 5 years. Listening to you gave me the push I needed. Thank you for being so honest about being scared. It helped me feel less alone. 1,847 downloads. But these emails, these individual human beings, reaching out to say me too and thank you and you changed something for me. These mattered more than any metric ever could. I got out of bed and walked to my bathroom. The same mirror where this had all started, but when I looked at my reflection now, I didn't see a stranger. I saw someone who'd done something hard. Someone who'd started before she was ready, failed publicly, learned constantly, and kept going anyway. Someone whose eyes were no longer empty. I saw me. Today was my last official day of the experiment. Tomorrow, I'd give my notice at Tech Nova. In 4 weeks, I'd walk away from the stable job I'd been using as a security blanket for 7 years. In 6 weeks, I'd start writing a book. I had no idea how to write. I was terrified. I was also more excited than I'd been in a decade. My phone buzzed. Marcus, of course. Marcus. Day 30. You did it. You actually fucking did it. Me. Language. Marcus, Mom's not here. I can curse. You did it, Jen. Me. I did it. Marcus. Celebration tonight. 7 p.m. Daily grind. Everyone's coming. Me. Everyone. Marcus. Everyone who matters. Mom, Dad, Sarah. Old Tom's closing the shop early. Dr. Chen said she'll try to make it non-negotiable. Be there. I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest. Somewhere in the past 30 days, I'd accidentally built a community. People who believed in me, who'd witnessed my imperfect start, who were invested in what came next. Me, I'll be there. My last day at Technova was surreal in its ordinariness. Meetings, emails, budget reviews, everything exactly as it had been for 7 years, except I moved through it all like a ghost, present but not quite there. At 3 p.m., I knocked on Robert's door. Got a minute? I asked. He looked up from his computer, immediately sensing something different in my tone. Of course, closed the door. I sat across from him, this manager who'd been perfectly fine, perfectly professional, perfectly adequate for 7 years. He'd never been inspiring or particularly memorable, but he'd also never been cruel or unreasonable. He was just fine, and fine was no longer enough. I'm giving my notice, I said. 4 weeks from today will be my last day. Robert's eyebrows shot up. Oh, wow. I wasn't expecting that. He recovered quickly, slipping into manager mode. Can I ask why? Is it the compensation? The role? Is there something we could... It's not about Tech Nova, I interrupted gently. It's about me. I've been here 7 years, in what I told myself was a temporary position, and I finally realized that if I don't leave now, I never will. I'll be here in another 7 years, still telling myself it's temporary. Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled, not a polite professional smile, but a genuine, almost relieved one. Good for you, he said. Really? Really? Jennifer, you're one of the best employees I've ever had. Reliable, competent, thorough. But, he hesitated. I've watched you for 7 years, and I've never once seen you excited about this work. You do it well, but you don't love it, and life's too short to spend it doing something you don't love. The kindness in his voice surprised me. I'd spent so long thinking of my coworkers as obstacles or judges, people I had to perform for and impress. But Robert was just a person who'd noticed my unhappiness even when I thought I was hiding it perfectly. "Thank you," I said, "for understanding. What's next for you?" I took a breath. This was the moment of truth. Saying it out loud to someone outside my inner circle, making it real in a different way. I'm writing a book about starting before you're ready, about perfectionism and procrastination and all the ways we sabotage ourselves by waiting for the right time. The words came easier than I expected. I also launched a podcast about a month ago. It's small, but it's growing, and a literary agent reached out last week about expanding it into a book. Robert's smile widened. "That's incredible. What's the podcast called?" "The Imperfect Start." "I'm going to listen to it." He pulled out his phone and immediately opened his podcast app, searching for it right there in front of me. Found it. Subscribed. I'll start it on my commute home. Something about that simple gesture. This man who'd been my manager for 7 years, taking 10 seconds to support my new venture, made my throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," I managed. "No thank you." For 7 years of excellent work, and for reminding me that it's never too late to choose something different. He stood, extending his hand. "We'll do the official paperwork tomorrow, but off the record, I'm proud of you." This took courage. We shook hands, and I left his office, feeling lighter than I had in years. One more step taken, one more bridge crossed, one more piece of someday transformed into now. The daily grind at 7 p.m. was more crowded than I'd ever seen it. Marcus had somehow convinced old Tom to let him reserve the back section, and when I arrived, I found a mismatched group of people who'd become, without me quite realizing it, the supporting cast of my transformation. Marcus and my parents at one table, deep in conversation, Sarah at another, her laptop open, probably still working on her manuscript revisions. Dr. Chen had actually come, chatting with old Tom by the coffee bar. A few of Marcus's employees clustered near the window. Even Amanda, my former colleague, who I'd interviewed for episode 3, had shown up fresh back from her year of traveling. "There she is," Marcus called out when he saw me. The woman of the hour. Everyone turned, and for a moment I wanted to run. All these people looking at me, celebrating me for doing something imperfect. What if I failed next? What if the podcast fizzled out? What if the book never happened? What if... But then my mother crossed the room and pulled me into a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Not for the podcast, or the book deal, or any of that. For choosing to live, for stopping the waiting, for being brave." My father joined the hug, and suddenly I was 17 again, being held by my parents, feeling safe and supported and loved unconditionally. Except I wasn't 17. I was 32, and this time they weren't protecting me from the world. They were celebrating me stepping into it. "Speech," someone called out. I think it was one of Marcus's developers. No, speech," I protested. "Speech," Marcus echoed, grinning like an idiot. "You talk into a microphone every week now. You can handle talking to 15 people He wasn't wrong. I'd recorded 6 podcast episodes, interviewed strangers, published my voice on the internet. I could speak to a small group of people who loved me. I climbed onto a chair, something the old Jennifer would never have done, and looked out at the faces, looking back at me. Okay, I said. 30 days ago, I stood in a bathroom and didn't recognize my own reflection. I'd spent 7 years, actually more than that, most of my adult life, waiting to be ready, waiting to be perfect, waiting for someday. Everyone was listening. Even old Tom had stopped wiping down the counter. My brother made me a bet. 30 days to start something imperfect, to launch something I wasn't ready for, to fail in public and survive. I found Marcus in the crowd. I thought it would be about proving I could do it, about checking a box, about winning a bet, but it wasn't. It was about learning who I am when I'm not performing perfection, when I'm not trying to be the person I think I should be, when I'm just being messily, imperfectly, authentically. I looked at Sarah. Sarah, you sent your manuscript to people. How many have read it now? 37, she said, including the agent who wants to represent me. Applause broke out. Sarah ducked her head, embarrassed, but pleased. 37 people have read Sarah's work because she stopped protecting it and started sharing it. That's 37 lives, potentially touched by her story. That wouldn't have happened if she'd waited until it was perfect. I found Dr. Chen in the crowd. Dr. Chen, you started your practice years before people said you should. How many clients have you worked with? Over 1,000, she said quietly. 1,000 lives changed because you started before conventional wisdom said you were ready. I looked around the room. That's what I learned in these 30 days. That done beats perfect. That imperfect action beats perfect inaction. That the world needs our messy, uncertain, scared but trying selves more than it needs our polished, perfect, never quite ready selves. My voice was shaking now, but I kept going. I launched a podcast with 1,800 downloads. That's nothing compared to the big shows, but it's 1,800 people who might be inspired to start something. 1,800 chances to matter. 1,800 moments where someone heard my imperfect voice and thought, if she can do it, maybe I can too. I stepped down from the chair. So thank you, all of you, for being part of this, for witnessing my imperfect start, for showing me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the thing while being afraid, for teaching me that someday is just another word for never, and the only time that matters is now. The applause was deafening in the small space. Marcus was wiping his eyes, not even trying to hide it. My mother was crying openly. Sarah was smiling so wide her face looked like it might split. Old Tom shuffled over and handed me a coffee. And the house, he said, for the young woman who stopped waiting. I'm 32, Tom. Not that young, compared to me. Everyone's young. He smiled, his weathered face crinkling. But age isn't the point. I waited until I was 63 to start this place. You waited until you were 32 to start your thing. The tragedy isn't how old we are when we start, it's if we never start at all. The party went on for hours. People shared their own stories of starting imperfectly, of failing and trying again, of choosing courage over comfort. Marcus's employees talked about the early days of True North apps, when it was just Marcus coding in his apartment, convinced he was going to fail. My parents told stories I'd never heard about their own early struggles. My father's business that went bankrupt when I was a baby. My mother's decision to go back to school at 40. Everyone had an imperfect start. Story. Everyone had taken a leap at some point, and hearing them all together, I realized something profound. The people I admired most weren't the ones who'd done everything perfectly. They were the ones who'd done things scared and messy and uncertain and kept going anyway. Around 10 p.m., as people started to leave, Dr. Chen pulled me aside. "I have something for you," she said, handing me a small, wrapped package. You didn't have to open it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the kind with thick, cream-colored pages that made you want to write something meaningful. On the first page, Dr. Chen had written, "For Jennifer, who had the courage to start, may you have the courage to continue with admiration. Rachel Chen, it's for the book," she explained, "for capturing thoughts, ideas, moments as they come, because writing a book is just like starting a podcast. You do it imperfectly, one word at a time, until suddenly you have something whole. Thank you," I manage, hugging her. "No, thank you for reminding me why I do this work, for showing people that it's possible," she smiled, "and for agreeing to that interview. Your podcast made me think deeply about my own relationship with perfectionism. Even therapists need therapy sometimes." After she left, I sat alone at a table, running my fingers over the journal's leather cover. The cafe was nearly empty now. Just me, Marcus cleaning up, and old Tom counting the register. My phone buzzed. An email notification from Patricia Lee, Sterling Creative Agency. Subject: Next step. Jennifer, following our call last week, I've prepared a proposal to present to publishers. I'm confident we can secure interest based on the podcast's growth and the timely nature of the content. I'll need a book proposal from you. Don't worry, I'll send guidelines. It doesn't have to be perfect, just authentic, like your podcast. Looking forward to working together. Best, Patricia. I read it twice. A real agent preparing a real proposal for a real book that I was actually going to write. This wasn't someday anymore. This was now. This was happening. Marcus sat down across from me, 2 beers in hand. "Today 30, he said, sliding one toward me. "Today 30, I echoed. We clinked bottles, and for a moment we just sat in comfortable silence, the way siblings can. "You know what's wild?" Marcus said finally. 30 days ago, you were convinced you needed years of preparation, months of research, perfect equipment, a foolproof plan, and you were wrong about all of it. Thanks for the reminder. No, I'm serious. You were wrong, and that's beautiful, because if you'd been right, if you really had needed all that preparation, you'd still be waiting. But you didn't need it. You just needed to start. He was right. Everything I thought I needed had been an excuse. The expensive microphone, the professional training, the certainty, the readiness. None of it was actually required. The only thing I'd needed was the courage to begin before I felt prepared. What comes next scares me more than starting. did, I admitted. Starting was one leap, but continuing, building, growing, that's 1,000 small leaps. Every day, choosing courage over comfort. Every day, showing up imperfect. Yeah, Marcus agreed. It's harder, but you know what? You've already proven you can do it. You did it for 30 days. You can do it for 30 more, and then 30 more after that. One day at a time, one imperfect step at a time. Old Tom joined us, lowering himself into a chair with a groan. You kids did good tonight, he said. This place has seen a lot of things over the years, but this might be the best. What do you mean? I asked. Watching people celebrate someone for being brave, for taking a risk, for doing something that scared them. He looked around his cafe with obvious affection. This place, it's not just about coffee, it's about those moments when people decide to stop playing it safe, when they order the weird drink, when they ask someone on a date, when they start a conversation with a stranger. Small braveries that add up to big lives. Is that why you finally opened it? Marcus asked. After 15 years of waiting? No, I opened it because I got tired of waiting, tired of playing it safe, tired of someday. Old Tom's eyes were distant, remembering. My wife, she passed away before I opened this place, and on her deathbed, you know what she said? We shook our heads. She said, Tom, stop waiting for perfect, just live. And I realized I'd spent our whole marriage waiting to have enough money to retire, waiting to travel, waiting to do all the things we said we'd do someday. His voice cracked slightly. She died, and all those somedays died with her. I'm sorry, I said softly. Don't be sorry, be brave. He looked at me directly. You're young, you've got time, but time isn't infinite. And someday becomes never faster than you'd think, so you keep doing what you're doing. Keep starting before you're ready. Keep living imperfectly. Keep choosing now over someday. He stood up, patting my shoulder with one gnarled hand. Now get out of here. I got to close up, and you got a book to write. Marcus dropped me off at my apartment around 11 p.m. The building looked the same as it had 30 days ago. Same cracked sidewalk, same broken elevator, same flickering hallway light. But I was different, fundamentally, irrevocably different. Inside my apartment, I sat at my dining table, the one I'd cleared off 30 days ago to make space for podcast planning, and opened the journal Dr. Chen had given me. The blank first page was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. All that white space, all that potential, all those words I hadn't written yet, all those ideas I hadn't captured, all those stories I hadn't told. I picked up a pen, an actual pen, not typing on a laptop, and wrote Day 30, the imperfect start. What I learned, done is better than perfect. Courage is doing it. Scared. Someday is another word for never. The only time that matters is now. Small steps compound into big changes. Vulnerability creates connection. Progress beats perfection. Starting is harder than continuing, but continuing is harder than starting, and both are worth doing. I paused, pen hovering over paper. There was so much more to say about the 1,800 downloads that represented 1,800 potential moments of courage, about Sarah's manuscript reaching 37 readers, about old Tom's wife saying, just live, about my mother's pride and Marcus's grin, and Dr. Chen's journal about the woman in the mirror who was no longer a stranger. But I didn't need to say it all tonight. I had time, not infinite time. Old Tom was right about that. But enough time to write the book, one imperfect word at a time to record more podcast episodes, getting slightly better with each one, time to build a life that was messy and uncertain and absolutely perfectly mine. I wrote one more line. Tomorrow, day 31. Keep going. Then I closed the journal and got ready for bed. Tomorrow, I'd give my official notice. Tomorrow, I'd start writing the book proposal. Tomorrow, I'd record episode 7 of the podcast. Tomorrow, I'd continue being imperfect. But tonight, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror one more time. The same mirror where this had all started. The same woman looking back at me, except not the same at all. The eyes that looked back weren't empty anymore. They were alive with fear and excitement and uncertainty and hope. They belonged to someone who'd stopped waiting. Someone who'd chosen action over preparation. Someone who'd learned that the perfect moment was a lie, and the best time to start was always now. Hi, I said to my reflection. I'm Jennifer Martinez, and I don't wait for Sunday anymore. My reflection smiled back. Genuine, imperfect, real. And that was more than enough. The coffee shop in downtown Manhattan was nothing like the daily grind. It was sleeker, more expensive, filled with people in business casual typing, importantly on MacBooks. But the coffee was good, and more importantly, it was 3 blocks from Sterling Creative Agency. I sat at a corner table, my laptop open, working on chapter 7 of The Imperfect Start, a practical guide to beginning before you're ready. The manuscript was due in 3 weeks and was nowhere near perfect, but it was about 70% done, which meant it would exist, imperfect but complete, in 3 weeks. My podcast had grown to 12,000 regular listeners. Not huge by podcast standards, but 12,000 real people choosing to spend time with my voice every week. I've interviewed 53 people so far, entrepreneurs, artists, teachers, parents, anyone who'd started something before they felt ready. Sarah's book had been picked up by a publisher. It would be out next spring, with a dedication that read, "For Jennifer, who taught me that done beats perfect." Marcus's company had doubled in size. He'd hired an operations manager, not me, someone much more qualified, and was already planning his next venture. My parents had become unexpected podcast fans, sending me interview suggestions and sharing episodes with their friends. My mother had even started her own small business, a consulting service for non-profits, at age 59. "If you can start imperfect at 32, she'd said, I can start at 59. And me? I was living in a small apartment in Austin, freelancing part-time, writing full-time, podcasting weekly, and somehow making it all work. Not perfectly, but work. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi Jennifer, you don't know me, but I found your podcast 6 months ago, when I was at my lowest point. I'd been planning to start a non-profit for foster kids for 8 years. 8 years of waiting to be ready. After listening to your first episode, I filed the paperwork today. We served our 100th kid. Thank you for showing me that waiting was just fear, wearing a different mask. I read it 3 times, tears blurring my vision, 100 kids served by a non-profit that wouldn't exist if Michael hadn't stopped waiting. If I hadn't stopped waiting, if none of us had stopped waiting, that was the real impact, not the download numbers, or the book deal, or the agent, or any of the external markers of success. It was the ripples. One person's courage inspiring another person's courage, cascading outward in ways I'd never know and couldn't measure. I typed back, Michael, thank you for sharing this. You didn't start because of me. You started because you're brave. I just reminded you of what you already knew, that someday is another word for never, and the best time to start is always now. Keep going. Those 100 kids are lucky to have someone who chose action over perfection. Then I opened a new note on my phone and added to my running list of book testimonials. Patricia had asked for stories from listeners who'd been impacted by the podcast. Michael's would be perfect for the back cover, but more than that, it would remind me, on days when writing was hard, when perfectionism crept back in, when I doubted whether any of this mattered, why I'd started, not for fame or money or validation, but for the Michaels of the world, for the people waiting for permission that would never come unless someone showed them it was okay to begin. I looked out the coffee shop window at the New York crowds rushing past, thousands of people, all with their own Sunday lists, their own fears, their own potential waiting to be unleashed. How many of them were waiting for the perfect moment? How many would wait forever? And how many might start today, right now, imperfectly, if they just heard one story, one voice, one person saying, I was scared too. I started anyway. You can too. I pulled up my podcast recording app. I hadn't planned to record today, but inspiration rarely arrived on schedule, and I'd learned to capture it when it came. Hey everyone, this is Jennifer, I said into my phone. Right there in the busy Manhattan coffee shop, I'm recording an impromptu episode, because I just got a message that reminded me why we do this, why we start before we're ready, why we choose imperfect action over perfect inaction. Around me, people typed and talked and lived their lives. Nobody was listening. Nobody cared that I was recording a podcast at a coffee shop table, and that was perfect. I want to tell you about a man named Michael, I continued, who waited 8 years to start a non-profit, who served his 100th kid today, and who almost never started at all. The episode would be messy, unscripted, probably too long, definitely imperfect, and it would be exactly what someone somewhere needed to hear, because that's what happens when you stop waiting for perfect and start doing anyway. You create something real, something human, something that matters. I recorded for 23 minutes, telling Michael's story and reflecting on my own 6 months of imperfect living. Then I stopped recording, did minimal editing, and published it. Episode 54, The 100 Kids, or Why Your Someday Matters More Than You Know. Leave on the internet, imperfect, real, mine. I closed my laptop and finished my coffee, watching New York rush past my window. Somewhere out there, someone was waiting to start a business, waiting to write a book, waiting to make a change, waiting for the perfect moment that would never come. And maybe, just maybe, they'd stumble across my podcast. They'd hear my nervous voice talking about starting scared, They'd recognize themselves in my story of waiting and waking up and finally beginning. And maybe, just maybe, they'd stop waiting too. That was the hope. That was the ripple. That was why I kept showing up, kept recording, kept writing, kept choosing courage over comfort. Not because I had all the answers, but because I was willing to ask the questions out loud, to fail in public, to be imperfect where people could see, and in doing so, give others permission to do the same. I walked out into the Manhattan afternoon, my phone in my pocket, my journal in my bag, my next chapter waiting to be written. The perfect moment never came, but the imperfect moment, they added up to something beautiful.